How your child is educated in Utah and the rest of America has changed. As a parent and taxpayer, did you know about it? As a local school board member, I didn't know about it. Ask your neighbors. In 2010, they'd never even heard about Common Core. Chances are your neighbors still haven't heard about Common Core. In 2010, the Utah State Board of Education adopted the Common Core standards for math and English. The state board claims the standards were state-led, more rigorous, and they included the public. However, if you listen to what was said at the time, and we have the audio, you get a completely different picture of the events leading up to the adoption of Common Core. First, we are told that the standards are state-led, not national standards, and the feds do not have strings attached. However, they were repeatedly called national standards at the time. From the State Board's official minutes on May 1st, 2009, it says that a group of 41 states and several trade organizations met to talk about creating national common standards. The State Board was then told on a Friday that if they wanted in, they had to agree to it by Monday. Nothing like taking time to deliberate on an important decision affecting the education of every public school student in the state. Here's what they were told.
They would like to have us sign a memo of agreement by Monday if we're going to do it. And so this is an extremely tight turnaround.
Now remember, we're told there's no federal involvement because we learn more in this meeting about the Common Core standards and the federal Race to the Top program.
In fact, we had Secretary Duncan's folks there at the meeting in Chicago when we talked about it. And we want standards that we can all hang our hats on. And the answer came back from the Department of Education that, okay, they're okay with that because they want the Race to the Top grant to be individual states. But part of the criteria for showing that you are part of the group that is worthy of a Race to the Top grant, can't think of any other word, because what they're talking about is you have to be cooperative with each other to qualify. And then you compete as an individual state for the money. And $500 million is no small chunk of change.
So really, was the federal government not involved? They were there at the meeting. They are giving out the money. They are giving their approval to the group on different aspects. Oh, and Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, he said that President Obama gave the directive himself. Obviously, the State Office of Education felt the federal influence in promoting Common Core. During a June 2009 committee meeting at the legislature, the assistant superintendent at the time, Larry Shumway, discussed the thought process behind the Common Core standards. The point of joining in with Common Core was to preempt the federal government from creating national standards.
But let's say that in the end there are national standards, not common voluntary state standards, but national standards, and they were mandatory. Would you rather that Utah sat at that table as they were developed, or that Utah not sit at the table when they were developed?
The current Department of Education at the federal level wants to do national standards. And unless the states do something, we're going to get national standards, and we're going to get them without any influence from us at all. This, and the reason why I voted in favor of it, was in fact as a maneuver around that.
One legislator voices his opposition to this end run.
The genie is out of the bottle. The federal government is already on its way to national standards, and now by doing this, we're simply endorsing, in my opinion, what they're trying to do.
So in order to avoid federal national standards with federal strings attached, they created state-led national standards with federal strings attached, and now they claim it's all fiction. The next thing we are assured is the State Board adopted these standards because they are more rigorous. In the May 1st, 2009 meeting, listen for the discussion and note their level of commitment to more rigorous standards.
Now, when I took a look at the background material, the achievement material, there's not a huge amount of difference between our standards and what they are going to use as a base anyway. And I'm going to estimate about 92% of our standards are the same as those standards right now. So it doesn't concern me that it would be so wildly out of line that we couldn't live with it.
So much for rigor. They are 92% of what we have, and there's nothing we can't live with. There was no debate or discussion about the standards because they were still being developed. But they weren't anything we couldn't live with. It wasn't about better standards. It was simply about working with the feds on getting grant money and complying with what they wanted from their vassals, the states. Finally, the State Board has touted all the public involvement that parents and teachers have had on Common Core, again from May 2009.
They are not going to allow the states to have, take a team to be a part of this. We can suggest individuals to serve on the standards team, but they don't want it to end up being like the Constitutional Convention and have it last 2 or 3 years. So, and the reason they're doing it is because the other pro to this, the money that's coming out for Race to the Top.
Ah, so now we see the real reason, the possibility for money. We can review and suggest people to serve on the team, but we can't take a team to be part of the development. But if we can live with the standards, we can maybe get some money from Race to the Top. 2 years later, and after Common Core has been formally adopted by the State Board, the Alpine School Board in July 2011 invited State Office Curriculum Director Sydney Dixon to present information about Common Core, because now the local board was having to allocate money for its implementation. The question of public input and involvement was brought up.
You've mentioned that there have been multiple, parents that have been involved in this. And this is just reality, but it doesn't seem to have been very publicized widely.
That was also my comment, is that I was teaching up until 2 years ago. I never heard of this. So
Sure.
You didn't hear it as a parent, I didn't hear it as a teacher, so I'm wondering how.
I think timing had a lot to do with it. It just started coming together about 2 years ago. That's the first, so right as you were leaving the classroom is when it was being rolled out. And in terms of parents, it wasn't, if it was a Utah, if it was just Utah that was working on this, of course the canvassing and the publicity would have been very different. But remember, these were about 30 states coming together.
Right, but
and
that's my main concern,
yes.
is that we've got 30 states, but Utah is Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And our parents and local control is what we're concerned with.
So, since Common Core has been adopted, we've been promised that it was state-led, more rigorous, and there was lots of input from the public. And yet, in the words of those who were involved at the time, it appears it was more about meeting federal requirements, getting federal dollars, and meeting federal deadlines. Contact your school board members, both state and local, as well as your legislators. Ask them to get the facts. They don't have to listen to spin from either the opponents or the proponents. The facts are stubborn things. Use them. And then it's time for you to put the local back in local education. Start attending your local board meetings. Make sure your views are heard and represented. Because if you don't, there are powerful entities ready and willing to do it for you.